So let's move into the survey side of things. The number 10 for surveys, machinery space fire protection. So seals, gaskets, maintained to prevent leaks of flammable products. So engine leaks, generator leaks are primarily what we're talking about here. On next one would be number 9, the means to stop fans and close openings, a newer requirement under Subchapter M. So not a way to close basically vents or other openings. So something that some folks have been trying to work with over the past few years to kind of get that into place. I understand that it can't just happen all at once, but we're nearly toward that 100% COI attainment level. So we should be seeing this number, I believe, this number should be dropping probably off the top 10. Number 8, hatches and other openings. So watertight hatches or watertight doors, the dogs, the seals of the operation, or there's wastage around those. And at number 7, readiness and testing. So the essential systems and other equipment not tested or examined under manufacturer's instructions or at their frequency required, such as your pressure relief valves, your general alarms, alarm set points, pilot house alerter, and those types of things. You can look in 143, 245, it has a list there of all the different things that have to be tested and their intervals. So this is a combination of missing records and missing activities as well. At number 6, first aid equipment, expired items not stocked in accordance with the TSMS. So we know Subchapter M doesn't expressly give you a list of what has to be in a first aid equipment. It just says you have to have an industrial type first aid kit. What you could do, there's different ways to look at this and consider it, but I would look back over at the ANSI standards and find out what might fit best for my company, and that I could say is an industrial type of first aid kit. But nonetheless, when you have expired items or it's not in stock in accordance with the TSMS, then that's coming in there at number 6. That's pretty frequent, really. Life buoys. This is something that the crew is looking at all the time. They're walking by all the time, and we're finding that the water lights not operating sometimes, the vessel name not stenciled on the life ring, or perhaps sometimes they're being faded and being reapplied. That will happen, of course. And then the life buoy missing or deteriorated is another one that we're having some findings with. Number 4 on the survey side of things, alarms and monitoring. So missing gauges or inoperable gauges at the machinery location. So these are the lube oil pressure, RPM gauges, cooling water. This is on your main engines as well as your generators. And if you have hydraulic steering, you have to have a steering fluid pressure gauge as well. I expect, again, this is one that's going to move higher or maybe even off of the top 10 list over the course of maybe the next year, I anticipate, because once these gauges are all installed, which they should be really installed now, if you're waiting for your survey to get your boat ready under Subchapter M, you're waiting too long because the effective date has already come and gone. So the boats are already supposed to be compliant with Subchapter M. Number 3, the marking of watertight doors and hatches and emergency exits. And you'll see that some of these things, like this marking, for example, these are really easy to address type of issues. We're talking a sticker or a label, not a hard thing to take care of with a little bit of maintenance. And if people are going around doing their weekly or monthly or quarterly vessel inspection checklist, whatever you may have, I know everybody has some sort of a checklist when they go around looking at these things. You need to challenge your crews to what it is that are being found during your surveys. Maybe even use this top 10 list to say, hey, here's some highlights that are being found during surveys and audits to help them maybe raise the bar a little bit themselves, get them to buy off and buy into what it is that we're doing here and get their boat back, to a good level. Shipboard lighting is number 2. So spotlights and floodlights. Notice that this was also number 3 on the audit list for the A and the B. Then I want to say A and B, that's 43410 A and B. Then there's a C also, which is the floodlights and spotlights. But the emergency lighting, as I got down here in the bottom by the asterisk on the bottom right corner by number 2, the 2-hour duration. Remember, that's a repeat from the audit side of things. And finally, the number one survey finding since the last board meeting is electrical systems in general. So of course, we're going to have one that's probably really wide open and like that, right? Electrical system in general. But you can see in the description there all types of electrical issues, from exposed wires, missing blanks, markings such as your voltage, or even what circuits are served by the switches, or your breaker box has a label to know which switch goes to what. And the watertight bulkheads, when they penetrate watertight bulkheads, they have to be maintained watertight. So those are the top 10 survey findings. If the Coast Guard gives the okay to conduct an inspection within 72 hours window, I don't agree that it should be a finding. After all, they are the overall enforcement agency. I understand that comment, but you have to remember, just like a TPO can't circumvent a regulation, the Coast Guard can't circumvent a regulation either. The Coast Guard can allow you to do things after a regulation hasn't been achieved. An example of that could even be seen in the permit to proceed process. So if you have an inoperable piece of equipment, the Coast Guard can allow you to continue a transit, but they're not telling you it's okay, you don't have to fix that issue. So the issue still has to be addressed, but they can allow you to maybe continue your voyage to go get that addressed. Under the audit regime, failure to make the notification, that's really a systemic issue, or it could be. Or I'll just put it this way, it's a safety management system issue, well, not necessarily systemic. But in your towing safety management system, I'm fairly confident that everyone has in there something along the line that a notice to the OCMI will be made within 72 hours. So when that being failed to be done, you're not achieving regulations and the intent of the safety management system. So it doesn't mean it's okay to not follow the rule. It's okay to proceed with the audit, but there still is some sort of a corrective action plan. Is what are you going to do to prevent reoccurrence? And for those of you that went to, we had some required training, maybe about 3 months ago for auditors and surveyors. You may remember that that was part of what a corrective action plan is there should be an investigation to find out what the causal factors are and what is going to be done to prevent reoccurrence. And I'm not going to say you got to do a deep, full root cause analysis on every finding, but you should be able to identify what's causing the issue. Because if you don't identify what's the causal factors, how are you ever going to really address the repeat issues? I hope that helps a little bit. Are there any other questions?
Can you explain the difference between weather-tight and watertight doors and respective labeling requirements?
Yes, I can. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just jump over here just to make sure I tell you word for word what it is. A watertight door, a watertight hatch, is one that's designed to prevent water incursion completely. That's the term, watertight. So there are boats out there that were not built to design standards under ABS, and the doors that were available at the time were what traditionally looks like a watertight door. They have a knife edge, a gasket, and dogs, but it wasn't designed under, I was going to say, design standards that way. Some people are calling those weather-tight doors. These are above the waterline, by the way. I think if you articulate in your TSMAs clearly what the intent of the door is, and you can justify that, then maybe you can call that a weather-tight door. So weather-tight door or weather-tight hatch is one that moisture and water, could come through, but it's not, critical if it does. Another, I'll call it a very flimsy example of a weather-tight door could be if you have one of those boats that have the watertight looking doors, and they keep it open most of the time, and then there's like a storm door on the inside, but it's a pretty weak weather-tight door, but it's going to prevent general weather, splashing in water and stuff from coming in, but it's not going to prevent water intrusion if a big swash of water came over the top. Where a watertight door, you can have seas, if you're out in the oceans, could come over and no water is going to go into the vessel. And then the labeling, is, they're in the regulations, watertight door keep closed or watertight hatch keep closed, whichever whichever you have.
Yeah, Caleb, David, does TVIB have a trending? Have y'all trended these top 10 survey findings from phase 1 to the current status of phase 4?
We have not. We can with relatively minimal effort. We have a very robust system of tracking about everything we do now in a database system. So we could search for how many times did a certain citation get cited in a survey or an audit, or we could spread it out, or separate it surveys to audits. We could say how many times did it happen, in the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, year 1, year 2, year 3 of Subchapter M. We can split that out any way we would like. Maybe that is something that we could look at doing, David.
Okay. All right. Thank you.